verse 29, it shall be when Hashem your God brings you to the land to which you come to possess it, then you shall deliver the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Eval. Where are they? Are they not on the other side of the Jordan River? Far in the direction of the sunset, which means west, in the land of the Canaanite that dwells in the plain. Far from Gilgal, near the plains of Moreh. It's a rhetorical question. For you are crossing the Jordan to come to possess the land that Hashem your God gives you. You shall possess it and you shall settle it. You shall be careful to perform all the decrees and all the ordinances that I present before you today. Now, it is always easy to follow Hashem when you need Him. So when the Jewish people are on the eastern bank of the Jordan River and they need Hashem to conquer the land, they will of course say, yes, we will do for sure. Hashem, please help us. But once they cross and once they possess the land and they settle it, that's when the danger begins. That is why it says, when you come to the land and you settle it, then you shall be careful to perform all the decrees. This is also a reason why in last week's Torah portion we have the mitzvah of saying Birkat HaMazon after we have a full meal. V'achalta v'savata uverachta. When you eat and you are satisfied, then you should bless Hashem. Why then? Why not before? Because before you will bless Hashem anyway, because that's a normal thing to do. If you need something, you ask for it and you say thank you and you say please. So when a person is hungry, he will recognize God and he will be subservient to Him. He will be humble. It's when he is satisfied, he has plenty, then he tends to forget about Hashem. Now, chapter 12, verse 1. We already mentioned that one of the ways a Jew can become distant from Hashem is when he follows examples of the nations that live around him. They follow idols, and he also follows foreign gods, just like them. They do forbidden relations, and he also does. They do abominable acts in their eating, in their way of life, and a Jew, by turning away from his own religion, will follow those of his neighbors. So that's what chapter 12 is speaking about, that we should destroy all foreign influence. These are the decrees and the ordinances that you shall observe to perform in the land that Hashem, the God of your forefathers, has given you, to possess it all the days that you live on the land. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations that you shall possess worship their gods, on the high mountains and on the hills, and under every leafy tree. They used to worship trees. That's where the Christmas tree came from. They would take a tree, or they would rather plant a tree, and when the tree became big, they would worship it. They would gather large masses of people around it. They would put gifts under the tree. They would decorate the tree and pray to it. So therefore we had to cut down every tree that was used for idol worship. You shall break apart their altars and smash their pillars and their sacred trees. These are the trees that are called Asherah. You shall burn in the fire, and their carved images shall you cut down, and you shall obliterate their names from that place. So we mentioned that in the land of Israel you have to keep the Torah, follow Hashem, and destroy all the idols. What about outside of the land? So we say that outside of the land, Hashem doesn't even have to tell us to keep the Torah, because it's easier to keep the Torah outside. Why? for a few reasons. Number one, when a Jew is outside of the land of Israel, he feels vulnerable. And because he feels vulnerable, he needs Hashem. He wants protection. And so he prays to Hashem. Often, the Jewish people outside of the land of Israel, for most of their history, had laws that would limit them in their business, that limited them in where they could live, and would sometimes even give rights to non-Jews to oppress the Jews. And therefore, outside of the land, Hashem doesn't need to tell us, you have to remember me. Of course you will remember me, because you have no choice. In the land of Israel, the Jewish people feel comfortable, and they say, I'm among the Jews, I don't need to follow Torah, because nothing will happen to me. We are together, we are one nation, unfortunately not under God, they think, and therefore nothing can happen to us. We're secure. I'm Jewish already in my heart. My neighbors are Jewish. My family is Jewish. There's no problem with intermarriage. And therefore they feel that they can just live any way they want and don't need to follow Torah. That's where Hashem says you must follow Torah. And that's what we see nowadays. Majority of the land of Israel is occupied by people who don't keep the Torah. And very often when they come out of the land of Israel, they come to the United States or other countries, all of a sudden they become religious. And everyone is surprised. Why? You were not religious there in Israel. Why all of a sudden in America you became religious? And they don't know why, but all of a sudden they have inspiration. They see they're among the non-Jews. They see that they are the minority. They feel far from their roots, and they have a natural desire to run to Hashem, as every Jew does in times of danger. And sometimes they say, oh, now that I am religious, let me go and live in the land of Israel. And they go back, and again they become not religious, sometimes. Why? Because again they enter that state where they feel comfortable, they feel already protected, and they forget about Hashem. Now, in verse 4, we learn that offerings may only be brought in the Mishkan and later in Beit HaMikdash. You shall not do this to Hashem your God. Just like the verses before said that the nations used to worship wherever they wanted. They would find a tree, they would find an animal, they would find a rock, and they would just bow down to it. You shall not do this to Hashem your God. Rather, only at the place that Hashem your God will choose from among all your tribes to place His name there shall you seek out His presence and come there. We're not allowed to offer sacrifices anywhere we want, under any tree or on any stone. It can only be done at a communal place, whether Mishkan, the tabernacle, or Beit HaMikdash, the temple, and only in a way that is prescribed. And there, verse 6, shall you bring your elevation offerings and feast offerings, the shelamim, elevation offering is olah, your tithes, your maaser, like maaser sheini and maaser behema, and what you raise up with your hands, which is teruma, your vow offerings and your free will offerings, neder and nedava, and the firstborn of your cattle of your flocks, the bechor of an animal. You shall eat there before Hashem your God, and you shall rejoice with your every undertaking, you and your households, as Hashem your God has blessed you. And now, prohibition of using private altars is stated. You shall not do like everything that we do here today. That when you use a private altar at the time when they were permitted, in between, before the permanent tabernacle was set up, or after it was destroyed, before Beit HaMikdash was built, private altars were permitted, but not like everything we do here today, which means you cannot bring communal offerings or obligatory offerings. If someone needs to bring chatat, a sin offering, he cannot do it on a private altar. Rather, every man what is proper in his eyes. Only voluntary offerings are allowed to be brought on private altars. And again, private altars can only be used when there is no Beit HaMikdash or there is no Mishkan, but that is only before Beit HaMikdash was built. Once Beit HaMikdash was built, the permanent temple in Yerushalayim, all private altars are forbidden, and we're not allowed to kill an animal with intent that I'm doing it for God. That is forbidden, and therefore if we invite a rabbi to our home when we buy a new house, or when someone is sick, or something, an unfortunate incident happens, and we want that such a thing shouldn't happen again, some people take an animal and shecht him. We have to be very careful not to say the word korban, not to say the word sacrifice or an offering, not to say that I'm doing this for Hashem or for any other deity or for a spirit. That will be either prohibition of sacrificing outside of Jerusalem, outside of the temple, which is a very severe prohibition, or it will be idol worship, which is even a worse prohibition. So the best is not to do such things at all. There is no need to kill roosters or chickens or lamb or cows in your house. It's a non-Jewish idea. It's a very dangerous idol worshipping idea, and it may potentially involve severe prohibitions of idol worship and sacrificing outside of Jerusalem, which are both punishable by karet or even worse, chas v'shalom. If a person wants success, he should follow the Torah, not offer sacrifices outside of Jerusalem. Now, verse 9, for you will not yet have come to the resting place or to the heritage that Hashem your God gives you. Which means, when you do come to your heritage and resting place, and you do build the Beit HaMikdash, then all offerings are permitted in Jerusalem, in the temple, but on a private altar, not all offerings are permitted. Okay. Verse 10. You shall cross the Jordan and settle the land that Hashem your God causes you to inherit, and He will give you rest from all your enemies around, and you will dwell securely. Beautiful promises. They were fulfilled again and again. Jewish people came into the land, settled it, then due to their sins they were exiled, and then again they were returned and built the Beit HaMikdash second time, and again due to their sins they were exiled and the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed second time. And now in our recent times, Jewish people came into the land again, and we're waiting for the coming of Mashiach so that we can build the Beit HaMikdash again. But what is stopping us, as I mentioned before, majority of the residents in the land of Israel are still denying God's existence. Majority still don't believe in God. majority still don't keep Shabbat, don't keep Kashrut, don't keep anything. So even though we repossessed our land, but we are far from perfect, we are far from what it takes to be a nation of God. Of course, Hashem does not judge those who don't recognize Him. He treats them as children, ignorant children. He focuses mostly on the religious Jews. They are His nation. They are His chosen. The observant Jews are the ones that sustain the world, that support the world, that supply the world with blessing. And the reason why we do have the possession of the land of Israel is exactly because of that. So that we have a place for so many thousands of religious Orthodox Jews to live, to raise their families, to serve Hashem, to learn Torah, and to pray. So if you concentrate on the religious Jews, then we are doing well. We make Hashem happy, Baruch Hashem. May we continue like that. Now, verse 11. Once the promise is given that we will dwell securely in the land, it shall be that the place where Hashem your God will choose to rest His name, which means in Beit HaMikdash, in Jerusalem, there shall you bring everything that I command you. Now all offerings are permitted, the elevation offerings, Olah, the feast offerings, Shlamim, your tithes, Maaser, and what you raise up with your hands, and the choicest of your vow offerings that you will vow to Hashem. And you shall rejoice before Hashem your God, you and your children and your workers and the Levites. Verse 13, beware for yourselves, lest you bring up your elevation offering in any place that you see. Again, obligatory offerings like Olah are not permitted on private altars. Private altars can only have voluntary offerings brought on them. Rather, only in a place that Hashem will choose among one of your tribes, there shall you bring up your elevation offerings, and there you shall do all that I command you. Next paragraph teaches us about offerings that developed a blemish. Such offerings cannot be brought to Hashem. Rather, they need to be redeemed, they need to be bought out, and then they become private property, and an individual can eat them. Verse 15, however, in all your soul's desire you may slaughter and eat meat according to all the blessing that Hashem your God will have given you in all your cities. The contaminated one and the pure one may eat it, like the deer and the hart. So, on a simple level, it means that if you want to eat meat personally, you have permission to slaughter and to eat anytime you want. However, the rabbis learned from the verse that it says the contaminated one and the pure one may eat it. They see that it's not talking about regular animals, because if it is regular animals, why would you forbid the contaminated one to eat? Rather, we're talking about an animal that was designated as an offering, and therefore if it was brought as an offering, a contaminated person wasn't allowed to eat it. And now that it developed a blemish, a mum, a visible blemish, it has to be redeemed, and once it's redeemed, you can slaughter it and eat it. And now the Torah needs to tell you that even though before the blemish a contaminated person wasn't allowed to eat it, now that it has a blemish, anyone can eat it. Verse 16, but you shall not eat blood. You should pour it onto the earth like water. Now, next paragraph speaks about food that has Kiddusha, that has sanctity, and therefore it must be eaten only in Yerushalayim. It is not an offering, not a korban, but nevertheless it has sanctity. For example, Ma'aser Sheini. In your cities, you may not eat the tithe of your grain. The word tithe in English means ma'aser, a tenth. So when you separate the first tenth of your produce, you give it to the Levite, and the Levites can eat it anywhere they want. But when you separate the second tithe, the second 10% from your grain, or from your wine, or from your oil, that is called Maser Sheini, and that needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim. So in your cities you may not eat Maser Sheini of your grain, your wine, and your oil. And also you cannot eat your firstborn of your cattle or your flocks. The Bechor, firstborn, you have to give it to Kohen, and Kohen has to bring it to Yerushalayim, offer it, and then eat it. And all your vow offerings that you vow, and your free will offerings, you may not eat in your cities. Rather, you shall eat them before Hashem your God, in the place that Hashem your God will choose. And now, verse 20, we speak about eating regular animals, unconsecrated animals, what is called chulin. When Hashem your God will broaden your boundary as He spoke to you, and you say, I would eat meat, I would like to eat meat, I like meat, for you will have a desire to eat meat. And now, because we spread out throughout the land of Israel, many people live far away from Jerusalem, so they cannot bring their animals to Jerusalem to sacrifice them, give part to Hashem, part to Kohanim, and take the rest and eat. It's too much. I can't travel a whole day, 2 days, 5 days, 2 weeks just to eat meat. So then Hashem says you can eat meat anytime you want, anywhere you want. Take a regular animal, unconsecrated animal, chulin, and you can slaughter it. To your heart's entire desire, you may eat meat. If the place where Hashem your God will choose to place His name will be far from you, you may slaughter from your cattle and your flock, as I have commanded you, and you may eat it in your cities according to your heart's entire desire. Here we learn that the laws of shechita, of proper slaughter, were commanded in the past. These laws are not written in the Torah, but Hashem says, as I have commanded you, which means it was an oral transmission that Hashem commanded to Moshe, and Moshe told us how to slaughter an animal properly. You take a knife, you make sure it's perfectly smooth and sharp, without any nicks, as you draw your nail along the knife surface on all 3 sides, one side, the other side, and the edge, the center. You should not feel any bumps and any nicks, that your nail should not get stuck anywhere. It should be smooth, even better than glass. And it should be sharp, so sharp that it will slaughter the animal from just 1 or 2 or 3 movements very quickly, without having to cut it many times with a dull knife. It needs to be smooth not to cause any scratches on an animal, and it has to be sharp so that it cuts fast, that the animal shouldn't feel any pain. And there are many more laws for shechita, and they are transmitted orally. And again, the Torah tells us about the prohibition of blood. Verse 23, only be strong not to eat blood, for the blood it is the life, and you shall not eat the life with the meat. You shall not eat it, you shall pour it onto the ground like water. You shall not eat it, in order that it will be well with you and your children after you, when you do what is right in the eyes of Hashem. And here there are two commentaries that differ as to the explanation of these verses. Why does the Torah speak so much about blood? Don't eat blood, please don't eat it. If you don't eat it, it will be good for you. Spill it on the water, be strong, don't eat it. One commentator says that by commentator I mean the rabbis of the Talmud 2,000 years ago. One of them said the reason why the Torah had to emphasize so much that we shouldn't eat blood was because the nations of the world at that time loved blood. They would drink blood for breakfast, lunch, and supper. It was a delicacy and also a staple food. In some countries, they still drink blood for breakfast every day. And the Torah therefore had to say, you will see people all around you drinking blood, but you should not do it. Please don't do it. It is a wrong thing to do. So that's the first opinion. The second opinion says, even at times when drinking blood is not practiced, this commandment still applies. Why? Which means we still read these verses today. Please don't eat blood. It's going to be good for you. Strengthen yourself and don't drink blood. To teach us about the great reward for all the mitzvot. Even something that most of us would not even consider drinking. We would be disgusted by blood. We don't even want to look at blood. Certainly we don't want to touch blood, and certainly we don't want to lick blood, and certainly we don't want to drink blood. And the Torah says, if you don't drink blood, it will be good for you. It will be well with you and your children after you. Just by listening to God and not drinking blood, you will have a blessing and your children will have a blessing. What did I do? I wouldn't drink blood even if you pay me. It teaches us that Hashem rewards us for listening to Him, even if we would do it on our own anyway. Just by thinking, Hashem, I'm doing it for you. I would do it anyway, but I'm doing it for you, Hashem. We receive a mitzvah. And certainly, for things that are difficult for us, and we have a desire to do, and Hashem says don't, and we withhold ourselves, just because Hashem said, we get a great reward. Or something we don't need to do, and we wouldn't do it ourselves, like putting on tefillin. And Hashem tells us, do it. And we say, yeah, but I have to run to work, but still, Hashem, for you, I'm going to do it. And it's difficult. Certainly, we're going to get tremendous reward. And therefore, when we are faced with routine actions, we shouldn't just do them because I want to do them. That's my habit. I do it anyway. Rather, we should say, Hashem, I'm doing it for you. Even though I'm doing it anyway for myself. Add the intent, Hashem, I'm doing it for you.